There are moments in public life when someone finally says the thing that everyone in a room has been thinking for years but nobody dared put into words. Those moments are rare. They are uncomfortable. And when they happen, they tend to change everything. What Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, reportedly said in a recent interview was exactly that kind of moment. A woman known for her steadiness, her discretion, and her carefully measured public persona apparently stepped forward and said what the palace had spent years carefully avoiding. And once those words were out, there was no pulling them back. To understand why Sophie's words carried the weight they did, you first have to understand who Sophie is within the structure of the royal family. She is not a peripheral figure. She is not someone who stumbled into royal life through fame or celebrity. Sophie Rhys-Jones, as she was known before her marriage to Prince Edward, came from a completely ordinary background. She built her way into royal life through years of patient, deliberate service. She made mistakes early on, faced tabloid scrutiny of her own, and survived it not by fighting the institution but by choosing to understand it. The royal family trusts Sophie in a way they trust very few people. When she speaks, it carries institutional weight. Which is precisely why what she allegedly said about Meghan Markle landed with the force that it did. The central claim, the one that tore through social media and dominated conversations across the United Kingdom and beyond, was straightforward. Sophie allegedly stated that Meghan's conduct toward Prince William had crossed lines that could not be explained away as cultural differences or simple misunderstandings. According to reports of the interview, Sophie described a pattern of behavior directed at William that made senior household staff deeply uncomfortable, that William himself clearly rejected, and that ultimately contributed more to the Sussex departure from royal life than any of the public narratives the world had been given. Sophie was not speaking as a gossip. She was speaking as a witness. Understanding that claim requires going back to the very beginning of Meghan's arrival in royal life. When Meghan Markle first appeared on the public radar as Harry's girlfriend in 2016, the initial reaction inside the palace was cautious optimism. Harry had struggled for years with the pressures of royal life. He had been open about his grief over the death of his mother, Princess Diana. He had spoken publicly about the mental health challenges he had faced. The family genuinely wanted him to find stability and happiness. When Meghan seemed to bring that to him, there was real relief in certain corners of the palace. That relief, however, did not last long. The first signs that something was misaligned came not from dramatic confrontations but from smaller, more telling moments. Meghan's decision in 2017 to confirm her relationship with Harry through an independent interview with Vanity Fair, without consulting the palace communications team and without giving Harry's own staff any notice, was noted internally as a significant red flag. This was not the behavior of someone learning the protocols of a new institution. This was the behavior of someone who had already decided that the institution's protocols did not apply to her. Palace staff who had spent careers carefully managing the flow of royal information were furious. More importantly, they were worried. A pattern was forming before the engagement had even been announced. But it was after the wedding in May of 2018 that the behavior Sophie allegedly described began to take shape in a way that could not be dismissed. According to the reported interview, Sophie said that within days of becoming the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan's physical conduct toward William was noticed by senior staff. The greeting at a post-wedding gathering, a lingering kiss combined with a prolonged grip on William's forearm, was described as something that senior household members could not explain away. William's physical response, a visible stiffening of his entire posture, was noted by everyone present. He was uncomfortable. He was rejecting the gesture with his body because he could not reject it with words at a formal gathering surrounded by guests. Staff saw it. They talked about it quietly among themselves. And they remembered it. What made the situation more disturbing, according to Sophie's reported account, was not any single incident but the accumulation of them over time. In October of 2018, at a formal engagement at Buckingham Palace focused on mental health initiatives, Meghan reportedly placed her hand flat against William's back in a gesture that witnesses described as far too intimate for the setting and the relationship. It was not accidental contact. It was deliberate. William pulled away immediately. The gesture and the rejection were both visible to anyone paying attention, and plenty of people were paying attention. By this point, senior staff were no longer dismissing what they were seeing as cultural unfamiliarity. They were documenting it. The Royal Foundation Forum in January of 2019 brought things into even sharper focus. This was a public event, broadcast and photographed, where William, Catherine, Harry, and Meghan appeared together to discuss their charitable work. Before the event, a seating arrangement had been agreed upon. The standard protocol placed couples together, William beside Catherine and Harry beside Meghan. According to reports of Sophie's interview, Meghan pushed to change that arrangement so that she would be seated directly next to William. The request was noted. The behavior during the event, which included repeatedly cutting across Catherine's speaking time to redirect media attention, was noted as well. For those watching closely, a picture was forming that was deeply inconsistent with the public narrative of a woman simply trying to find her place in an unfamiliar institution. What Sophie allegedly made clear in her interview was that William never wavered. Not once. Every gesture was answered with withdrawal. Every approach was met with the kind of professional distance that left no room for ambiguity. William understood exactly what boundaries were being tested, and he held them completely, consistently, and without exception. His composure throughout what was clearly an ongoing and uncomfortable situation was described as remarkable by those who witnessed it up close. He did not escalate. He did not confront. He simply refused to allow any boundary to be moved, no matter how many times it was pushed. This matters enormously when trying to understand what happened next. Because according to Sophie's reported account, the pattern of behavior toward William did not stop when William made his discomfort clear. It continued. And it continued in ways that began to affect not just William but Catherine as well. There is a formal complaint that was reportedly filed by Catherine in late 2018, placed on record through a private channel with a senior household official. This was not a staff grievance processed through standard HR procedures. This was Catherine, Princess of Wales, putting her own name in writing on a document that stated her sister-in-law's conduct toward her husband had crossed a line and could no longer go without documentation. The complaint was buried. It never reached the press. But it did not disappear. When the palace's internal HR review was launched in 2021, that document was reportedly pulled back out and placed at the center of the process. The HR review itself revealed far more than the bullying allegations that made headlines at the time. According to Sophie's reported account, the review contained documented records of boundary violations spanning years. There were logs of late-night messages sent directly to senior royals bypassing every official communication channel. There were witness accounts describing Meghan's physical conduct toward the Queen and Prince Charles at formal occasions in ways that multiple observers described as staged rather than genuinely warm. And perhaps most damagingly, there was evidence that private family conversations had been fed to media contacts in America, with intimate details of Windsor family life used to construct the public image of Meghan as the emotionally open American warmth against the cold and distant British institution. The people whose private words were being shared were sitting in rooms just down the corridor at the time. When Sophie allegedly described what she believed Meghan's actual objective had been all along, the assessment was devastating in its clarity. Meghan was not trying to belong, Sophie reportedly said. She was trying to become the most powerful presence in the room. And when it became completely clear that William was never going to engage with the approach being directed at him, the strategy shifted. The target changed. And the person who became the primary focus of that strategy was Harry. Understanding how Harry was drawn into a position of complete isolation from his family requires understanding what he was carrying when Meghan arrived in his life. Harry had spent decades living with unresolved grief over the death of his mother. He had spent his entire adult life defined by his position as the spare son in a family where constitutional hierarchy is not a metaphor but a governing reality. He was a man looking for someone who truly understood him, someone who could see past the title and the duty to the person underneath. Meghan apparently saw all of that with great clarity. According to Sophie's reported account, Meghan knew every wound Harry carried. And she did not try to heal any of them. Instead, she used them. Message by message, interaction by interaction, Harry's connections to the people who had known him longest were quietly severed. When William's office reached out to arrange time between the brothers, the responses came back blocked. Meghan said they were busy. Meghan said they needed space. The invitations stopped being extended because they stopped being answered. Two brothers who had walked behind their mother's coffin together as teenagers, who had leaned on each other through everything the family had put them through, eventually stopped speaking directly to each other. Sophie reportedly described this as a psychological blockade. The description is exact. Meghan positioned herself as the only person in Harry's life who truly understood him while simultaneously ensuring that the people who had always loved him came to be seen, through her framing, as secretly hostile. Harry needed to believe he had no one except Meghan. And Meghan worked methodically to make sure that belief held. The Sandringham Summit in January of 2020, the crisis meeting where Queen Elizabeth, Prince Charles, Prince William, and Prince Harry negotiated the terms of the Sussex departure from royal duties, has been described publicly as a painful but ultimately managed family negotiation. What reportedly happened in a private conversation before the formal session began tells a different story entirely. Harry pulled his father aside before the meeting started. According to accounts referenced in royal biographical research and corroborated through separate palace sources, Harry told Charles that if Meghan's terms were not met, meaning the retention of royal titles, independent financial operation outside the palace, and continued state-funded security arrangements, then Meghan had told him she would give an interview to a major American outlet that would be more destructive than anything the family had yet faced. Harry delivered that warning to his own father on his wife's behalf, while his wife sat in California. Charles reportedly went silent for a long moment before asking his son one question. He asked whether Meghan understood what she was threatening. Harry had no answer. The Queen was briefed on that exchange before the formal session began. Those with knowledge of that day have said it was the moment Elizabeth's view of Meghan became not complicated but permanent. The Oprah Winfrey interview broadcast in March of 2021 was the delivery on that threat. Sophie reportedly made clear in her interview that she had contacted Meghan multiple times before it aired. She had offered a private path through the difficulties. She had opened doors that were quietly and completely ignored. The interview went ahead. Prince Philip was in cardiac care. He was 99 years old. The palace did not experience what they watched as a desperate woman finally finding her voice. They experienced it as a calculated strike timed to land precisely when the institution was at its most exposed. The pattern of timing had been consistent from the beginning. The Sussex Netflix documentary trailer had been released during Earthshot, one of William's flagship charitable projects. The holiday content had been scheduled in the same broadcast window as Catherine's Christmas Carol concert. Every major piece of Sussex content had been aimed at a specific royal moment. The damage was never accidental. The timing was never coincidental. By the summer of 2022, Queen Elizabeth was 96 years old, and her health was declining in ways the country understood quietly and with great sorrow. While the nation prepared to say farewell to the woman who had defined the monarchy for 7 decades, Meghan and Harry's legal team were completing trademark applications in the United States for a commercial brand called Royal Globe. The filings covered media production, podcasting, lifestyle content, and educational material across an extensive range of commercial categories. Trademark applications of that scale require months of legal preparation. The filing timelines mean the work was underway while the Queen was still alive. The Queen died on September 8, 2022. Palace staff with knowledge of those filing dates described their reaction as among the most profoundly disrespectful things they had witnessed across the entire history of the Sussex operation. The commercial operation that followed the Oprah interview, the Netflix deal, the Spotify podcast, the Archetype series, the documentary, the memoir, the lifestyle brand, was built on a foundation that contained a fatal internal contradiction. You cannot publicly dismantle an institution, call it racist and structurally cruel, describe it as a system that drove you to the edge of your mental health, and then attempt to bottle and sell the warmth, the prestige, and the royal glow that the same institution generates. The audience saw the contradiction immediately. By late 2025, the numbers told the story without requiring editorial comment. Catherine's favorability rating in the United Kingdom stood at 73%. William's stood at 69%. Meghan's had fallen to 17%. Spotify had ended its relationship with the Sussexes entirely. Netflix had pulled back its financial commitment significantly. The Archwell Foundation had seen its donations fall by 40%. The audience the Sussex operation had assumed would follow them indefinitely had made its judgment and delivered it through the one language the commercial world understands without ambiguity. Sophie's elevation of Catherine throughout her reported interview was not personal flattery. It was an argument about what institutional survival actually looks like when you strip away the celebrity and the performance. Catherine, Princess of Wales, understood from her earliest days in the public eye that the role she was entering was not a platform. It was a purpose. She spent years learning the pace and the requirements of royal life without making her learning curve into a public narrative. She built her charitable work steadily and without constant announcement. When she faced the most serious personal health challenge of her life in 2024, She managed it with a privacy and a dignity that the public respected deeply. She did not use her vulnerability as content. She did not monetize her struggle. She came back to her duties when she was ready and the country was waiting for her. The contrast Sophie was drawing was not subtle. One woman had arrived in the royal family and spent her time inside it trying to become the most prominent person in every room. The other had arrived and spent her time inside it learning how to serve. One had treated the monarchy as a launching pad for a personal brand. The other had treated it as the framework of a life's work. The institution did not need to make that argument publicly. The evidence made it without assistance. What Sophie allegedly said in that interview was not, at its core, simply about Meghan Markle. It was about what the monarchy is and what it demands from the people who enter it. The crown is not a celebrity vehicle. It is not a content opportunity. It is not a platform from which personal grievances can be amplified to a global audience for commercial gain. It is an institution with centuries of weight behind it that has survived things far more threatening than any individual who tried to bring it down. The institution is still standing. The people who tried to weaponize it for personal gain are sitting in California watching their commercial ventures contract and their audience erode and their relevance diminish month by month. Sophie did not say any of that directly. She did not need to. The facts said it for her. And once Sophie had said what she said, the story the world had been told for 5 years began to look very different in the light of everything it had quietly left out.